When my own grandson stole and sold my antique collection for $450,000 to invest in a cryptocurrency pyramid scheme, he had no idea he was missing out on a treasure worth $12 million hidden in my home. But justice has a way of catching up with those who deserve it, and sometimes it arrives at the most unexpected moment. My name is Elizabeth Thornton, I'm 74 years old, and I've lived my entire life in the small town of Massachusetts. My story didn't begin yesterday or the day before. It stretches back to the days when my late husband, William, and I were just starting to build our life together. But today I'm going to tell you about how greed can turn a loved one into a stranger, and how sometimes justice prevails in the most surprising ways. It all began in 1970 when William brought home a battered Chinese vase from the Ming Dynasty, purchased at a flea market for a mere $20. The seller swore it was a fake, but my husband's eyes lit up with that special spark. He always had a knack for sensing the authenticity of old things. When we took the vase to an expert, we learned it was worth nearly $3,000. Back then, that was a fortune for a young family. "Elizabeth," William said that evening, holding my hands, "I think we've found our calling. Imagine how many beautiful things are lost in this world just because people don't know their true value." That's how our passion for collecting antiques began. We traveled across New England, scoured auctions, and built connections with collectors and dealers. William had an uncanny instinct for authentic pieces, while I learned to unravel the history, origin, and value of each item. Over 40 years of marriage, we amassed a collection that became a source of pride and admiration. Our Victorian home on Maple Street turned into a small museum. The living room was adorned with 18th-century French clocks and hand-woven Persian rugs. The dining room housed English porcelain sets and Georgian silver. The library held first editions of American classics and rare manuscripts. The true gems of our collection were a painting by an unknown Hudson River School artist discovered in an abandoned Vermont estate, a set of period Chinese porcelain, each piece hand-painted, and my personal favorite, a music box encrusted with precious gems. By the late 1990s, our collection was valued at around $500,000. We weren't just collectors, we became respected experts in the antique community. Museums consulted us on acquisitions, and young collectors sought our advice. But my greatest joy came from sharing this passion with family. Our only son, Michael, showed polite interest, but his career as a Boston lawyer consumed his time. His son, our grandson Jason, however, seemed to inherit our love for history and beautiful things. Jason grew up a curious boy. Every weekend, when his parents brought him to our house, he'd spend hours listening to our stories about the origins of each item. His eyes sparkled when I told him how a vase had traveled from an imperial palace in Beijing to our living room, or how a candelabrum had lit dinners in a London aristocratic mansion 2 centuries ago. "Grandma," he'd say, plopping down beside me on an antique sofa, "tell me more about the signet ring." And I'd recount the story of a gold signet ring that once belonged to a family of colonial merchants from Salem. Jason knew every item in the house, every story, every legend. He was my little heir, not just by blood but in spirit. When William passed away in 2010 after a long illness, I considered selling part of the collection. The house felt too large for one elderly woman, and the value of the items kept growing. But Jason, then 16, begged me not to. "Grandma, this is our family history," he said, hugging me. "Promise me you'll keep it all. When I grow up, I'll help you take care of it." I promised. Deep down, I always knew it would one day pass to him. Michael had no interest in antiques, but Jason was different. He was the continuation of William's and my dream. After high school, Jason enrolled at university to study art history. I was so proud. Everything seemed to be falling into place. He visited regularly, and we'd pore over auction catalogs together, discussing trends in the antiques market. But something changed in his final year. Jason became distracted, often glued to his phone during our conversations. When I asked about his plans after graduation, he was evasive, saying he was exploring different opportunities. "Maybe you could work for an auction house," I suggested, "is always looking for young talent with a good education." "Yeah, Grandma, I'll think about it," he'd reply, but I could tell his mind was elsewhere. In the spring of 2018, just before Jason's graduation, I noticed him asking odd questions about the value of specific items in the collection, not out of a historian's curiosity, but with a practical edge. "Grandma, how much are those Chinese vases in the living room worth now? Or that painting in the dining room, it's pretty valuable, right?" At first, I brushed it off. Maybe he just wanted to understand the scope of what he'd one day inherit, but there was a persistence in his questions that unsettled me. Jason's graduation was a joyous occasion. The whole family gathered to celebrate his achievements. He graduated with honors and even received a job offer from a small Boston gallery. I was thrilled. He was finally going to tie his life to art and antiques. But a month after graduation, Jason came to me with news that stunned me. "Grandma, I'm not taking the gallery job," he said, nervously fidgeting with his graduation cap. "I've got bigger plans." "What plans, dear?" "I'm going into investing. You know, there are incredible opportunities in cryptocurrencies right now. People are multiplying their wealth tenfold in months." My heart sank. Cryptocurrencies. This boy, who knew the history of every item in my house, who could talk for hours about the techniques of Chinese porcelain painting, was suddenly obsessed with virtual money. "Jason, dear," I began cautiously, "what about your education, your love for art?" "Grandma, the world has changed," he said with the condescension young people sometimes use when explaining life to their elders. "Old ways of making money don't work anymore. You have to keep up with the times." He told me about his new college friends who had supposedly made fortunes trading Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies. He mentioned a mentor, some Bradley Coulter, who was teaching a group of young people revolutionary investment strategies. "The only problem is startup capital," he concluded. "To really make it big, you need serious money to get in." A chill ran through me. Was he leading up to what I thought he was? "Jason," I said firmly, "I hope you're not asking me for money for these experiments." "Of course not, Grandma," he exclaimed, but something in his eyes made me uneasy. "I'm just sharing my plans with you. You've always cared about my future." Over the next few months, Jason visited less often. When I called, he was always busy, meetings, educational seminars, you name it. His parents grew concerned, but Michael thought it was just a phase of growing up. "Mom, give him time to figure himself out," my son said. "Not everyone has to follow a traditional path." But I saw something different. On the rare occasions Jason visited, he looked at the collection with a new gaze, not as an heir to family history, but as an appraiser. In the fall of 2018, something happened that opened my eyes for good. Jason came for Thanksgiving but was oddly agitated and nervous. At dinner, he kept checking his phone, texting, stepping out for important calls. "Is everything okay, dear?" I asked. "Yeah, Grandma, just work. Markets never sleep, you know." After dinner, he asked to see some items from the collection to refresh his memory. We walked through the house and I told the familiar stories, but I noticed him taking notes on his phone. "Why are you writing things down?" I asked. "Just want to remember everything," he said, avoiding my eyes. That night I couldn't sleep. Something was wrong. The next morning I found Jason had left early without saying goodbye. Michael said he had an urgent investor meeting. My suspicions grew over the next few weeks. Jason started asking pointed questions about whether I had documentation for the most valuable items, where I kept authenticity certificates, and what appraisals I had. "Just for insurance," he explained. "You know, a collection like this needs proper coverage." I was planning to update the insurance, so his interest seemed reasonable, but my instincts, honed by decades of life, urged caution. In December, something happened that put me on high alert. I came home from a doctor's visit and realized someone had been in the house. Nothing was missing, but some items were slightly out of place. When you've lived in a house for half a century, you notice these things. More alarmingly, someone had clearly been photographing the collection. I found faint fingerprints on the glass display cases, and one Chinese vase was positioned at a slightly different angle to the window, better for capturing its painted details in the light. Who else had keys to my house? Only Michael and Jason. I called Michael. He assured me he hadn't been there or given the keys to anyone. That left only Jason. "Maybe he just wanted to show something to his friends," Michael suggested. "You know how proud he is of the collection." But deep down, I knew it wasn't about pride. Christmas 2018 was the last time we pretended everything was fine. Jason came for the holidays but was distant and distracted. He received an expensive gift from me, a rare book on American antiques, but barely thanked me. Jason, I said on Christmas Eve when we were alone, I want to talk to you. About what, Grandma? About your plans, your future. You know that one day all of this, I gestured around the room, will be yours, but I need to know you understand the responsibility that comes with it. Jason sat up straight, and I saw that cold glint in his eyes that scared me. What if I don't want that responsibility, he said. What if I think there are better ways to use these assets? The word assets hit like a blow, not family heirlooms, not treasures, not legacy, assets. Jason, these things aren't just money. They're our family's history, your grandfather William's memory. Grandma, he interrupted, with all due respect, times have changed. Keeping that much money tied up in old things isn't practical, not when there are opportunities to make it work. We argued then for the first time in our lives, not shouting or throwing harsh words, just a cold chasm of misunderstanding opening between us. Jason left the next day, citing important business. After New Year's, he stopped visiting altogether. When I called, he gave curt replies, always busy. Michael tried to mediate, but even he noticed something was off with his son. He says he's working on big investment projects, Michael told me over the phone. Claims he'll make a fortune soon, but when I ask for details, he gets vague. In February 2019, the unthinkable happened. I went to Florida for a week to visit an old friend. When I returned, my house was empty. Not entirely empty, furniture and everyday items remained, but the collection, 48 years of gathering, love, and care gone. The Chinese vases, Persian rugs, paintings, silver, porcelain clocks, the music box, all vanished. Only the less valuable items remained, apparently not worth the trouble of moving. I stood in my empty living room, unable to believe what had happened. This wasn't just theft, it was a betrayal by the person closest to me. On the coffee table was a note in a familiar handwriting. Dear Grandma, I'm sorry I had to do it this way, but I knew you wouldn't understand. I took the collection not out of greed, but out of love for you. The money I make will secure a better future for all of us. In a year, you'll see I was right. Love, Jason. P.S. Everything will be okay, trust me. I read the note over and over until the words blurred through my tears. My grandson, the boy I loved like my own son, had stolen everything from me. But not everything, he didn't know it, but not everything. You see, William was a cautious man. Back in the 1980s, when our collection began to gain significant value, he insisted we create a secret storage for the most precious items. Elizabeth, he said then, beauty attracts not just art lovers but thieves. We need to be smarter. Beneath our house, in the basement that looked like any other, William built a hidden room. The entrance was concealed behind a false wall, disguised as an old tool cabinet. The door opened only by pressing a specific combination of bricks in the wall. In this secret vault, we kept the most valuable and portable items in our collection: 18th century jewelry, rare coins, small but immensely valuable artworks, including miniatures by renowned masters and a collection of antique pocket watches. The crown jewel was a diamond ring said to have belonged to. Its authenticity was by 3 independent experts, and its insured value was nearly $2 million. The total value of the secret vault's contents approached $12 million. Only William and I knew about this room. Even Michael had no idea. And Jason could study the house, photograph the collection, and plan his theft all he wanted. But he stole only the display, unaware of the true treasures beneath his feet. That evening, standing in my plundered home, I went down to the basement and checked the secret room. Everything was intact. Jason hadn't even thought to search the basement, probably deemed it unworthy of his attention. Of course, I should have called the police. Stealing items worth nearly $500,000 is a serious crime, but something held me back, maybe a lingering hope that Jason would come to his senses, or a desire to handle this within the family. I called Michael. When he arrived and saw the empty house, he went pale as a ghost. Mom, this can't be. Jason couldn't have. He loves this collection. Call him, I said. Michael reached Jason only on the 5th try. The conversation lasted nearly an hour. I could only hear Michael's side, but it was enough to grasp the situation. What have you done? You stole from your own grandmother. What investments? Jason, this is a crime. Return everything immediately. When Michael hung up, he looked broken. He says he's already sold most of it through antique dealers in New York, he told me. The money's invested in some crypto scheme. He promises to pay it all back with interest in a year. And if I want to go to the police? He asked me to tell you he's sorry but thought you'd understand. And if it goes to court, he'll tell everyone how you and Dad hid income from antique sales from the IRS. That was a low blow. Yes, William and I had occasionally sold items privately, not always declaring the full amount. It was common in the collector's world, but Jason was threatening to use it against me. "Mom," Michael said, taking my hands, "I'll find a way to fix this. I'll make him return everything." But I knew that wouldn't happen. Jason had crossed a line from which there was no return. For the next few months, I lived in a strange limbo. The house felt vast and empty without the collection. Friends in the antique community asked why I no longer attended auctions or exhibitions. I told them I'd decided to downsize due to age. Michael tried to stay in touch with his son, but their relationship deteriorated rapidly. Jason grew cold and distant, even with his father. He claimed the family didn't understand his vision for the future and that sometimes tough decisions are needed for the greater good. From snippets of conversation, I gathered things were going well for Jason, at least initially. He moved into an expensive Boston apartment, bought a new car, and started living the life of a successful young investor. Sometimes he called me, not to apologize or explain, but to boast about his successes. It seemed he still craved my approval deep down. "Grandma, my portfolio's up 300%, he'd say excitedly. "If this keeps up, I'll buy you a new collection, even more valuable." I listened and thought about how money can change a person. My kind, curious grandson had turned into a profit-obsessed speculator who could justify any betrayal with potential gain. But life has a way of teaching lessons to those who think they can toy with others, fates without consequence. In the spring of 2020, when the world was shaken by the pandemic, cryptocurrency markets became wildly unstable. Jason stopped calling with boastful updates. When Michael tried to reach him, Jason would say he was facing temporary setbacks but had everything under control. And then in the summer of 2020, what I'd been waiting for happened. The FBI arrested Bradley Coulter, Jason's mentor, for running a financial pyramid scheme. His revolutionary investment system was a classic scheme disguised as crypto trading. Coulter and his associates defrauded over 200 investors out of more than $50 million. Most of the money vanished into offshore accounts. Jason lost everything, not just the money from selling my collection, but his own savings and loans he'd taken to boost his investments. Worse, as one of Coulter's top recruiters, he faced criminal charges. Michael called me in tears the day Jason was arrested. "Mom, they're charging him with aiding fraud. He could get up to 10 years. His lawyer says the only way to reduce the sentence is full cooperation with the investigation and restitution to victims." "And what does he have to make restitution with?" I asked, though I knew the answer. "Nothing, Mom. His apartment been repossessed for debts. The car, too. He doesn't have a cent." That night, I sat in my empty house, reflecting on justice. Jason got what he deserved. His greed and willingness to deceive turned against him. Yet he was still my grandson, the boy I once loved more than life itself. The next morning, I made a decision that surprised many. I hired the best lawyer in town to defend Jason. "Mrs. Thornton," Mr. said after reviewing the case, "your grandson is in a tough spot. The evidence of his involvement is overwhelming, but if he agrees to a plea deal." "Do whatever you can," I said, "but there's one condition." "What's that?" "He has to come to me in person and apologize, not over the phone, not through intermediaries, in person." The lawyer passed my condition to Jason, who was under house arrest in a tiny rented room in Boston. For 3 days, Jason was silent. Pride battled his fear of prison. Fear won. He came to me in October 2020. I barely recognized him, gaunt, with dull eyes in cheap clothes. This wasn't the confident young man who'd stolen my collection a year and a half ago, but a broken, frightened boy. We sat in the same living room where the Chinese vases and Persian rugs once stood. Jason couldn't speak for a long time, just stared at the empty shelves and tables. "Grandma," he finally said in a quiet voice, And he cried. For the first time in years I saw his tears, not tears of anger or frustration, but of remorse. I messed everything up, he sobbed. I stole from you, I betrayed you, I thought I knew better, that I could make more money and pay it all back with interest, but I was a fool, a greedy fool. I sat silently, letting him speak. I didn't expect it to turn out like this, he continued. Coulter seemed so smart, so successful, he showed us reports, numbers. I thought I was investing in the future, our future. And now you see it was a lie. Yes, he whispered. Yes, Grandma, I see I didn't just lose money, I lost you, I lost Dad, I lost myself. We sat in silence for nearly an hour. Jason told me how he'd been gradually drawn into the world of quick money and easy wins, how he drifted from family, how he justified increasingly shady actions to himself. You know what's the worst part? He said at the end. Even when I was selling your things, part of me knew it was wrong, but I convinced myself I was doing it for all of us, that when I got rich, you'd thank me. And now I see those things weren't just expensive objects, they were our family's history, Grandpa William's memory, your life, and I threw it all away for a pipe dream. When Jason left, I wrestled with the idea of forgiveness. Could I forgive someone who'd stolen not just my possessions but my faith in human nature? Were tears and remorse enough to atone for such a betrayal? But then I thought of William. What would my husband have said? He always believed people could change, that even the gravest mistakes could be corrected with genuine intent. The next day, I did something that shocked everyone, including Jason. I wrote a letter to the prosecutor handling the case. In it, I pleaded for leniency for my grandson, explaining that he was young and naive, deceived by an experienced and genuinely remorseful. But more importantly, I attached a check for $500,000 as partial restitution for the victims of Coulter's scheme. Where does an 80-year-old widow from a small Massachusetts town get that kind of money? It was time to reveal the secret vault. I sold the ring. It wasn't an easy decision. That ring was the jewel of our collection, something William and I had searched for and waited decades to acquire. But sometimes love demands sacrifices, even the most painful ones. The prosecutor was so stunned by my action that he agreed to a deal. Jason received 2 years of probation, 500 hours of community service, and mandatory financial literacy training. When Jason learned what I'd done, he came to me again. This time he wasn't crying, he was in shock. Grandma, where did you get that kind of money, and why? Why would you do this, after what I did to you? Sit down, Jason, I said. It's time I told you something about this house. And I told him about the secret vault, about how his grandfather was a wise man who understood the importance of reserves, about how the most valuable treasures in our collection had been under his feet all along. Jason listened, mouth agape. When I finished, he shook his head. So I stole $450,000 from you, and you were sitting on $12 million worth of treasures the whole time. That's how it turned out. And you sold the most valuable ring to keep me out of prison. Yes. But why, Grandma, why after everything I did? I took his hands, now so thin and cold. Because you're my grandson, because I remember the little boy who spent hours listening to my stories about old things, because people make mistakes, but that doesn't mean they don't deserve a second chance. Jason cried again, but this time there were tears of gratitude and relief. What do I do now? He asked. How can I make up for what I've done? Start small, I said. Find a job, a real job, not chasing quick money. Learn to live honestly. And when you're ready, maybe you can study art history again, not to make money, but to understand. Over the next few months, Jason slowly rebuilt his life. He got a job at a local library, rented a modest apartment, and began making small restitution payments to some of Coulter's victims. Our relationship healed gradually. He started visiting every weekend, helping around the house, and we began talking again, not about money or investments, but about books, history, life. One day in the fall of 2021, he asked me, Grandma, what about the rest of the treasure? What are you going to do with it? I smiled. By then, I'd already decided. Most of it I'm bequeathing to a museum. Let people see these beautiful things, study them, enjoy them. Isn't that better than keeping them locked in a secret room? Will you leave anything for the family? A few things, items that hold special meaning for our history, and enough money for you to get an education, a real education, not for quick riches but for knowledge. Jason thought for a moment. You know, Grandma, you taught me a lesson. How so? I thought I was the one, that I could outwit everyone and hit the jackpot, but the real treasures were right there and I didn't even think to look for them. I stole pennies, leaving a fortune behind. The lesson isn't that you missed out on big money, I said. The lesson is that greed blinds you. You were so focused on quick profits that you didn't see the true values: family, trust, honesty. And, he added quietly, I realized the greatest treasure was that you forgave me. It's been 2 years since Jason stole my collection. He's 27 now and works as an assistant curator at a small Boston museum. The pay is modest, but he's happy. He's studying art again, this time for the love of beauty, not profit. Michael is proud of his son. Their relationship is fully restored, even closer than before. Tragedy sometimes teaches people to value each other. As for me, I sold a few more items from the secret vault and started a charitable foundation to help victims of financial scams, with a focus on young people like Jason who fell prey to their own naivety and greed. The house doesn't feel as empty anymore. Not because I bought new things, my collecting days are over, but because it's filled with love and forgiveness again. Sometimes when Jason visits, we go down to the basement and I show him the remaining treasures. He looks at them with the same awe he had as a child, but now there's no calculation in his gaze, just genuine love for beauty. You know, Grandma, he said recently, I think Grandpa William was a very wise man for building that vault. Why that? He knew real treasures need protecting, not just from thieves, but from family when they lose their way. We laughed. After everything, we could laugh together again. Last week, Jason brought me astonishing news. One of the items stolen from my collection, the Ming Dynasty vase, the very one that sparked our family's passion for antiques, had been found at an auction in New York. I recognized it from the catalog photo, he said excitedly. The police confirmed it was sold through a network of dealers tied to Coulter's scheme. There's a chance we can get it back as evidence. And what do you propose? I've saved a bit of money over these 2 years, if the auction house agrees to sell it to me at a reasonable price. Jason, I interrupted, you want to buy back the vase you stole? He blushed. I know it sounds crazy, but that vase is special. It's where it all began. Maybe if it comes back to our house. Then what? Then the circle will close and we can start anew. I thought about his words. That vase was indeed the symbol of our collection's beginning, and maybe now it could symbolize our family's renewal. All right, I said, but on one condition. What's that? When the vase comes home, we'll put a plaque next to it. It'll tell this whole story, how greed tears families apart and how forgiveness puts them back together. Jason hugged me. That's a beautiful idea, Grandma. Today, as I finish telling this story, I'm 76 and Jason is 27. We have many years ahead to rebuild what was broken and create something new from the ruins of old mistakes. I don't know if we'll get that vase back, but I know we've already reclaimed something far more valuable: trust in each other. As for the remaining $12 million in the secret vault, I've bequeathed most of it to museums and charities, but I set aside a small portion for Jason, not money to squander, but an educational fund he can use only for studies, books, and research. Greed nearly destroyed our family once, but wisdom, patience, and forgiveness proved stronger. And you know what? Sometimes in the evenings when Jason visits, we sit in the living room, no longer as empty, thanks to a few simple, beautiful things I've bought, and he tells me about his work at the museum, how he helps visitors understand the history of exhibits, how he's learning himself. In those moments, I see the same spark in his eyes that he had as a child, listening to William and my stories about old things. Only now, that spark is fueled not by greed, but by genuine love for beauty. And I know my plan worked. Jason learned his lesson, the most expensive and valuable lesson of his life. He learned the cost of betrayal and the value of forgiveness. He learned the difference between owning beautiful things and loving them. And I learned that true treasures can't be stolen. Love for family, the ability to forgive, the wisdom gained over years, these stay with us no matter what happens to material things. That's the story of how my grandson stole a $450,000 collection from me, unaware of the $12 million treasure hidden beneath his feet. But really, it's a story about how the most valuable things in life can't be bought, sold, or stolen. They can only be earned. If you enjoyed this story, please give it a like and share your thoughts in the comments. Until next time.